imagine.
So a word of thanks today to the choir. Normally, choir gets the Sunday after Christmas off, and on this Sunday after Christmas, as we're saying a word of transition and gratitude for staff who are transitioning off, they wanted to be here and offer words of love through that song, and I thought it was beautiful. Thank you very much, choir. Good morning. As we come together this first Sunday after Christmas, we are led into the scriptures about the story of the boy Jesus at the temple. I invite you to open your hearts and your minds this day to this reading of God's Word. Now, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went on a day's journey. Then they started looking for him among their relatives and friends, and when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astounded. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he had said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. And may God bless to us our reading and understanding and applying of this word to how we live our lives. So every year, about this time when the hustle and bustle of Christmas is over, and we've eaten too much and spent too much, we have the chance to think a little bit about life. Well, at least I do. Time seems to fly by. How did it get to be almost 2019 already? Where did the year go, right? How did I get to be this old? Yes, I think that also. What do I have to show for it? Every year about this time, we make our resolutions, right? This year I'll lose weight. This year I'll be more patient. This year I'll read more books. I'll write more letters. I'll give more to charity. And often when we give ourselves time to think about it, or when we're brave enough to think about it, maybe we'll ask, how did we spend our time? And was it worth it? It's been said that a glance at our checkbooks and our credit card statements tell us where our real priorities lie, and there's something true about that. But it's also true that our calendars will reveal our values as well. How much time do we spend on making money, on our jobs, on learning, on ourselves, our clothes, our good looks, right? How much time on food and entertainment? How about how much time on our kids, on our friends, on our loved ones? How much time in service to others? How much time thinking about things that matter, or just trying to avoid the important conversations? Beneath these records of our allocation of time and money, what do they tell us about what we really care about? What really matters to us? What we spend our hearts on? When our daughters were a bit younger, we used to keep a family calendar, you know? Today they have their cell phones, so we still keep a calendar, but we used to have an honest-to-goodness 12-month paper calendar. Sometime this week, we would go get a new one, we'd unwrap it, and we'd mark up all the school vacation days, the dates for work travel and special events like birthdays and important royal games, you know, things like that. And we put it back up on the wall. And you can do that for things that you're expecting. But even more, I think, there are these turning points in our lives, times when these questions loom even larger. Like maybe when we're embarking on a new adventure, like going off to college or starting a new job or deciding whether to get married, or when you leave a long-time job and into retirement. Or maybe when you're staring into the eyes of a newborn child and realizing just how mortal you really are, right? Maybe it's when we're facing serious difficulties and trials in an illness that we have, or an illness in someone that we love. Or maybe it's the loss of work or home or a relationship. These are just as momentous, just as profound times. Or when you're growing older and coming to grips with the inevitable decline of friends and loved ones that we've known forever. Indeed, we have these turning points in our lives, stress points, good and bad, that open our hearts to big questions, the important questions of meaning, where questions can easily progress from ordinary to sacred, from the merely profound to the deeply spiritual, deeply religious. And it was at such a point as this that Jesus went to the temple in Jerusalem with his parents. It was Passover, a major holiday, and he'd been there a million times before, kind of like going to church on Christmas or on Easter. Only this time something was different. He was 12 years old, the age of turning away from childhood and the age of turning toward young adulthood, towards maturity. It was a momentous age. And in that age, in that culture, it was time for him to stop being a little kid, and to start growing up. Time to be a young adult, and time to decide what he was going to spend his life on. Time to decide whether he'd go the possibly more ambitious route of following God's plan for him, or just stay with the easy way, only going into his father's carpentry shop. Time to decide whether he'd be a good kid who listened to his mother, or whether he'd listen to the divine voice that demanded more of him than even she did. Time to start deciding who he would listen to discern the truth, to figure out what he really believed, to figure out what he was sent here to do. Just as sooner or later we ourselves had to figure these things out too. But it's not just once in our lives that we confront this. We do this again and again, just as Jesus did at key moments in his life. First, when he was 12, and then at the beginning of his ministry, and then when he wrestled with the dark one and his own doubts in the wilderness, and when he faced his opposition in the synagogues, and when he faced his betrayer at the dinner table at Passover, a Passover 20 years after he'd come with his parents as a young man to the temple. There are turning points in our lives when big questions of life seem to loom large, where we have choices to make, where we search for guidance, when we have some things that we have to let go of in order to get ready for the next thing that God has in store for us. And oftentimes, when we have big decisions to make, some of us might go to the house of God to pray, like Jesus did at age 12. The truth of the matter is that in our lives and in the lives of those we love, or even the very existence of this building that we love, these things can be snatched from us tomorrow. And all the regrets that we've accumulated won't get them back again. But the converse is also true. We have today. And if we're fortunate, we'll also have tomorrow. And we have the opportunity to live fully today and live fully tomorrow. How do we choose to spend our lives? And how do we choose to live them? Frederick Buechner, who's one of my favorite authors, put it this way once: "You are alive. It needn't have been so. It wasn't so once, and it will not be so forever, but it is now. And what is it like to be alive in this maybe one place of all places anywhere where life is? Live a day of it and see. Take any day and be alive in it. Nobody claims that it will be entirely painless, but no matter." A couple of years ago now, a few weeks before Christmas, I sat on a bench in Oak Park Mall. I was waiting for Brooke to emerge from JCPenney's. And a big man was rolling my way, and I knew, sure enough, that he'd sit down right beside me and take up more than his share on our narrow bench, and he did. That's okay. He was nice enough, but clearly he was brooding about something. He plopped down, and he huffed a little bit, and he said, "I have to get some exercise. Doctor says so." He said this without explanation, as if we had been lifelong friends. I had one heart surgery already, can't afford another. No, sir. I walk the sidewalks as long as I can, but not in this here weather. It's too cold. So I walk up to J.C. Penney's and then back to Sears, and then I sit down a while and catch my breath. I wondered to myself how, since there wasn't a time for any breath between his words, but that's okay. He told me how, he didn't have a lot of money, but the missus sometimes came to the mall too, to stroll and to dream of things in the windows. Now he wished that he could have her spend just as much as she wanted. And I should make sure that my pension was good, because if it's not, you'll suffer for that the rest of your life after giving an honest life work. I thanked him for that, by the way. He was nice enough, but truth be told, I glanced a couple times at the store, no sign of Brooke. Instead, though, I noticed two young women emerge from J.C. Penney's talking with each other. Their kids in the strollers that they were pushing made some noises at each other too, talking as much to themselves and their toys as they were to each other, but they were apparently glad for the company. And at that moment, I had this thought. Those kids are going to grow up, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to grow old, and sooner or later, they're going to be walking the malls, hungry for company, reviewing their lives, sorting out mistakes and hopes and pleasures and regrets while they rest some time between J.C. Penney's and Sears. Every year, about this time, we take stock of life's passing. Maybe that's good practice for the church to do this time of year too. We get to ask ourselves maybe the most important question we ever ask: what really matters? How will we choose to spend the years and days and moments that lie ahead of us, however few or however many that they might be? At the turning point between the end of his childhood and the beginning of his life as a young man, Jesus had a choice that he had to make about how he would spend his time. And he could have chosen the easy path, the one before him that was more clear, more obvious, but much less risky than the unknown future that God was calling him to. In fact, everyone expected Jesus, the carpenter's son, to just become a carpenter, even if he showed aptitude in the temple. This ability to ask good questions and to seek out faithful answers. But that's not what Jesus chose. He chose to spend his life doing the faithful thing, even the risky thing. Jesus chose to urgently seek the will of God for his life. I mean, this text is something amazing. The last time that I dug into this passage in Bible study, our group marveled with how little that we know about Jesus' childhood. And that's true. The other than the other birth stories, one in Matthew and one in Luke, and these little snippets where, according to which one you read, the family either goes into exile in Egypt for a few years, that's in Matthew, or the family loses Jesus at the temple on their very own home alone moment. That's what we read today in Luke. But that's it. That's all we get. Nothing about the previous 12 years or about the next 18, really, not until Jesus appears to be baptized by his cousin John. Luke tells us Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. And for Luke, that's enough. That's enough detail. We're left to fill in the story and to imagine what Jesus was like as a precocious teenager, as a young man moving into adulthood, with his other seminal moments that are skipped over, and the other life-changing, life-defining opportunities where Jesus must have taken stock, reviewed his priorities, pondered the future, and then chose, as we must choose, to do this rather than that, to go there rather than here. There's so much that's missing. But for Luke and for the other gospel writers, apparently, that's enough. Maybe it's enough for us to ask for the same blessing, that we might increase in wisdom as we increase in years, that we might find divine and human favor. Maybe that is enough. For we ourselves, as a church, as people, will continue to have our priorities before us, our everyday, every year things that arise that we can mark on our calendar today and we can plan for around the corner. And we have also these seminal moments, these defining moments when who knows what we'll have to do when we look at our priorities and make new choices. Over the next year, in countless years past, we'll have the opportunity to experience love. We'll laugh until we cry. We'll breathe delicious smells. We'll see heartbreaking sunsets. We might set our jaws in silent rage. We'll grieve until our bones ache, and every tear that can be shed might be wept. We'll find courage beyond our maturity, and we will fail those that we know that need us the most. We will speak truth, and alas, we'll tell lies. And no matter how we spend our time, time will pass, and we will grow older. My prayer for us as a church and for us as individuals is that we also grow wiser, more loving, more faithful, more willing to take risks in serving God and serving others. The author of Colossians that Pat read for us today reminds us of how life and the worship of God are intertwined for those of us who follow the example of Jesus Christ. Indeed, in just 2 short verses, Colossians encapsulates much of the gospel teaching about what life in Christ is about. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so must you forgive. The author talks about being clothed with love, about letting the peace of Christ rule in our hearts, about letting the Word of God dwell richly in us. Let us remember that the dwelling place of God is no building, as beautiful as his sanctuary is, as many events has happened here that has strengthened our faith, but rather indeed in the hearts and the deeds and the faith of those who follow where God leads them. And as we continue our faithful work to maintain our ministry here in this building that enables a common worship and a common ministry, let us keep these big questions in front of us. What really matters? What is it that we as a church, as individuals, are going to spend our time and our talents on in 2019? Well, if we listen to the voice of Colossians, we hear these suggestions: compassion, humility, patience, forgiveness, thankfulness, clothing ourselves with love. Letting Christ, letting God dwell in our hearts. What better kind of living, really, is there? The Reverend John Buchanan, I quoted him a couple weeks ago, often used a benediction that he received from the Lutheran historian Martin Marty. Life is short, and we have not much time for gladdening the hearts of those who travel the way with us. Oh, be swift to love, make haste to be kind. My friends, as we ponder the big questions at the turn of a new year, that's good advice. The only wisdom that I might add to it is that is something we get from the example of Jesus that we see in Luke's gospel during times like this. Let us urgently seek the will of God. Let us listen for God's voice above all of the other voices that want something from us, that want something for us. I mean, it's almost a new year. It's a time of change for us, as it always is. Time for letting go and starting anew. So during this season of reflection on our past and on our future, may we seek the will of God for our life together. And I promise you this, we will not be disappointed. Let it be so.